Gruesome Magazine.
Hello, once again, I'm Doc Rodden, and this is Gruesome Magazine, where we review the very latest in streaming and video on-demand horror movies. Each week, my co-hosts Jeff Mohr, Crystal Cleveland, Dave Dreher, and I will take a look at very spooky, scary, and gory genre offerings. Tonight, we're going to play Monster Kid. We're looking at Boris Karloff, the man behind the monster, a documentary coming to you from Shout. Oh, this will be different for us, but it'll be fun, I'm sure. All right, joining me this week is my co-host, Jeff Mohr. Jeff, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I can assure you that tonight's episode will be a thriller.
A thriller, wow. Oh, that was awesome. Also joining us this week is Crystal Cleveland, the Living Dead Girl. How you doing?
I'm fabulous. Boris and I are just hanging out. We have a lot of color right now.
You do. You're more like around
like
the 60s kind of thing. You're doing maybe who am I thinking
green.
of?
I like the green and the orange and then reds and then pinks and blues and purples. Yeah, it is like practically a rainbow.
You're radiating.
Radiating. Roger Corman is directing you right now. So, all right.
The radiating woman.
She's radioactive. That's later.
Radioactive woman. Yeah. The atomic woman.
What we're going to do is we're going to review this documentary. We're going to give our first impression, and then we're going to dive into the facts. I doubt if we'll get into spoilers. This isn't spoilery kind of territory. There's nothing groundbreaking in that respect here. And then we'll wrap things up with our final thoughts, our score 1 to 5, and our favorite scene. But before we do all that, we hope you enjoy not only this review, but many other that we have on our site. So check them out when you're done watching this one, of course. And if you want to help us out, hit the subscribe button down below, share with a friend, hit the like button, hit that bell, do all the things that all those YouTubers say to do, because that's cool. But most of all, we want to hear your comments down below. Absolutely. All right, what film are we talking about? We're talking about Boris Karloff, the man behind the monster. It's available in theaters and on demand and other areas from Shout, beginning 9/17/2021. It's directed by Thomas Hamilton, featuring interviews with Guillermo Del Toro, John Landis, Roger Corman, Ron Perlman, Sarah Karloff, Peter Bogdanovich, and many more. The synopsis is: beginning just before his debut as Frankenstein's creation, the documentary compellingly explores the life and legacy of a cinema legend, presenting a perceptive history of the genre he personified. His films were long derided as hokum and attacked by censors, but his phenomenal popularity and pervasive influence endures, inspiring some of our greatest actors and directors into the 21st century, among them Guillermo Del Toro, Ron Perlman, Roger Corman, John Landis, all of whom and many more contribute their personal insights and anecdotes. Yes, that's the kind of documentary this is. We'll get into all that. Let's find out what our first impressions are. And Crystal, you are first.
Me. Okay, so I loved this documentary. I honestly, I love Boris Karloff movies, but I really did not know very much about the man at all. So this was a lot of information for me. I'm sure there's plenty of Boris lovers out there who will probably be like, oh, I already know all that. I know all that. But for me, most of it was a lot of new information. It's kind of interesting to hear about all of the struggles that he had becoming Boris Karloff. And I knew so little about the man, I didn't even realize he changed his name. So
from William Henry Pratt.
Yeah, so that's pretty bad. I mean, I probably should know that. He's always been so talented as an actor. I find it so interesting that it kind of made him seem more real and a little bit more raw. One of the things that he said was about how he didn't feel like he was good enough to be a stage actor and stuff. I think the stories were interesting and compelling. I think that they had a lot of different perspectives. Boy, watching this, I was like, oh yeah, Dick Miller. I was like, yeah, a lot of the people was kind of sad. Roger Corman looks really awesome in this interview, though, doesn't he? Holy moly, guys! Like he's like almost 100 or something, I think.
Yeah,
isn't
he's
he?
still cranking away. He's in his 90s. I know that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, like he looks. I don't know when that was done, but he looks good. So I don't want to talk too much about what happens or what they tell in it, but oh my god, I also for some reason, you know how that he and Bella like work together and stuff, but you never really think about whether they were friends. I really liked that they were close.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of think, I would think they maybe would have been more competitive, but they were, they were a different era. They were gentlemen. But look at that face. He was so handsome too. So,
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. Apparently, he liked to get married.
A lot.
So yeah, I absolutely think that if anyone is a Universal Monsters fan or just a Boris fan, I think that they should check this out. I think it's well thought out. I think that it has a lot to it, and I think that there's nothing particularly mind-blowing in it, but I think it's awesome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Roger Corman is 95. Just
see,
born in 1926.
So
Oh man, Jeff Barsler, what was your first impression of Boris Karloff, the man behind the monster? Now, before you answer that, we have the Decades of Horror, the classic era, which would be the majority, all but maybe a handful, or not even a handful of his films. One or two that was filmed after, before his death, but released after. So I would imagine, sir, going into this, that this would be especially important to you.
Yeah, it is. And Boris Karloff's one of my people. I always liked him, but doing the classic era, we just recorded our 10th Boris Karloff film out of 108 episodes. So, and there's plenty more. I really enjoyed this because I did get, we researched quite a bit, and some of this I knew. Like I knew about him being in Arsenic and Old Lace on the stage and getting screwed out of playing it in the movie. But especially since he's playing a guy that looks like Boris Karloff, that's the whole point
funny.
of it. But some of the background around, but like Crystal mentioned, that he was afraid to go on the stage. He didn't think he was a good stage actor, and they had to kind of be talked into it, And I think he's like a lot of these horror actors, including Bela Lugosi. I think they get shorted on their acting chops. We just did Black Sabbath, the Mario Bava film, and him as the Wurdelak or Gorka in that is one mother effing disturbing role, and he is just crazy in that. And you can tell at that time. The other thing is, they talked about him having trouble with his legs. You can see that. You can tell that in that movie because he kind of does he has a little bit of a hobble, I guess. But I loved it. I loved how they hit some of his early films. What were some of the things that got him noticed? How he ended up in Frankenstein, which really set him off. Universal grabbed him and just started billing him as Karloff, So yeah, I doubt if I could list all 10 of them off, but some Universal ones, some one of the Luton.
Did you do Isle of the Dead?
We haven't done Isle of the Dead yet, but I've got it. I think we will hopefully while it's still on Shudder.
Oh, it's on Shudder. Oh, nice.
Well, they did a Luton package a while ago, and I think it's still up there. But that's one of my favorites. We did do The Body Snatcher, which is a Luton film, which is, when I watch it for the podcast, is far better than what I thought. I'm kind of getting off subject, but they talk about this on there, and he and Bela Lugosi have a great scene in that. That's
sad.
really, really disturbing. So I think they were competitors, only maybe not so much like I don't like that guy, but I'm kind of pissed off that he's getting this attention and I'm not, or I'm pissed off that he got this role and I didn't take it when I should have. Because Karloff was supposed to get the Frankenstein role, and then they were.
Lugosi was, yeah.
Lugosi was supposed to get the Frankenstein role, and he backed out because it didn't have any speaking.
Any lines.
So anyway,
I think that was the right choice for him, though. Still, like,
as it turned out, Karloff is the right guy. It's hard to imagine anybody else. But I like this a lot, and I liked how they talked to like his daughter is spliced in there a bunch, and people that were around at the time were spliced in. So it's interesting. I wanted more. There was a couple movies I was disappointed they didn't talk a little bit more about. One of the ones we did was The Devil Commands, which I think is a great movie. Although they did mention it. But anyway, I love watching them. I love the thrillers. I love this, how he went into his old age. All those stories they told, I just thought were great.
Yeah, I am a Monster Kid. I'm later in the Monster Kid generation, from the 70s instead of the 60s or late 50s when it first started up. But at the same time, I love all these icons and legends, Lugosi, Karloff, Luchanes, and Vincent Price, of course, and, Cushing and Lee. And I've watched so many documentaries and behind the scenes stories on Blu-rays and DVDs. And then I've got, a library of books about different actors. I've got one about Karloff. I got one about each of them probably over there. And so there wasn't a whole lot in here new. Although I will point out one later on in the episode, something I didn't know. And I thought that was actually quite fascinating, but I still really enjoyed this. I really got engrossed in, following it. I liked how it was presented. It was smart to dive straight into Frankenstein and then pause and go back and then catch up and then go forward from there, because that's what people are going to want to see. So you got to kind of get them in there. So I thought it was well crafted in that way as well. And, for the older stuff, they bring in, critics and historians and stuff like that. And that makes sense. And then as you start getting into the 60s, we start getting, some of the actual directors and actors that worked with him during that time. And it's, it really is fascinating how his career, how he kept busy all the time, even though us as horror fans don't recognize that because, he's doing Arsenic and Old Lace on Broadway for, some time, and he's not really making as much content. So we don't see it in the cinema, but he's definitely doing stuff. And of course, then when TV became a thing, he was on it all the time. So really, it really encapsulated how prolific his career was, what he was able to accomplish. He basically had, 3 cycles of his career, if you look at it. And, his legacy, of course, lives on. People know who Karloff is for his work, to this day. So, and they will never forget. I mean, his visage is just as popular now. And it helps. It helps a great deal, I think, that he did the Grinch,
absolutely.
Because every kid, grows up, watching the Grinch, or at least they did. I don't know about now, but they did. And of course, that voice and what he did, and that, of course, just brings you right into it. And everything they said about, his voice and doing the work there is absolutely 100% true. So they really show the, his history and what made him, you were talking about Crystal, where they get into, his family growing up. And I mean, we don't dive a whole lot into it, but we do get enough of it that we really get a good sense of, the man that ended up in Canada and then ended up in Hollywood and under what circumstances. And, and of course, the world around him at the time, which they could have actually brought in more, but I can see why they didn't.
Oh no, they like touched on everything
I know there's so
without.
much, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
like
I
so
go ahead.
so I really like this, and I think any monster fan, any horror fan should check it out. It's well worth it. If you are if you are a Karloffophile, then you're. I still think you'll enjoy it, but you're not going to. It's not going to really give you terribly much to new stuff. But I don't think that matters in this. It's really passionate. It's really a sweet film, and I really enjoyed it.
I think that's a good way to put it. It's passionate.
Yeah, I was going to mention his um, activity in helping found the Screen Actors Guild.
Yes, that could be a documentary in and of itself.
Yeah,
Him
with
and
him
Bella,
and James
right? Both of
Cagney,
them?
yeah, and others, yeah, because they put their careers on the line to do that. So.
right.
I,
Well,
I
and
thought
everybody.
it was really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No.
Well, yeah, the idea that the studios were cutting their salaries in half, and
It's horrible, really.
so
All that work. I'm just making $10,000 half price. I was like, how much is that today? Don't ask me to do math because I can't do it. But okay, so something I didn't even really think about was the racism. Like, I'm glad that they touched on it, but didn't touch on the Fu Manchu thing or whatever. I was like, I don't know this movie.
oh yeah,
Oh my
You know
gosh,
what?
yeah. So Karloff did it in the 30s, and then Christopher Lee in the 60s for
Yeah.
Hammer did a couple of them.
Oh, there's another one. There's the same.
and Franco after that. It's incredible. It's what they call it. They call it the yellow.
I know it. They actually said that.
I know.
Like,
It
Yeah.
was
it was no, and
but
there.
what's interesting was when I grew up, I knew that. I mean, I knew that was a thing, and this
Right.
was in the late '70s because of reading
Oh.
many books about it at the time. If
Charlie
not-
Chan, right?
Yeah, well, Charlie Chan, yeah. But
Not
yeah,
an
his
Asian actor.
yeah. It's interesting with Boris because he does have
He is
a
Indian.
Middle Eastern background, but
Yeah.
it's still kind of
Well, he was he faced racism himself because
Right.
of his skin, and he wasn't even. He was still only half, and just dark. He would just happen to be darker than everyone else. And they're like, oh, it was obvious when you saw him in photos. It's just so okay. So this really puts it into context, like how far we've come, thankfully, in a short. Because I was like, God, it feels like a different world. Feels like a different world to me. I'm like, whoa. I was like, it's odd that you look at this photo and yeah, it's like you can tell he stands out. But like his daughter said, it worked in his favor for him, which is great. Sorry, I just thought that was interesting that they touched on that, and it was something I had never even thought about before. With him, and I didn't even realize he was where he came from. I mean, I was clueless going in. I've always loved Boris and Bella, their movies, but I never really knew much about them.
Yeah, I love the stories when like he gets surprised on the set of Son of Frankenstein for his birthday, and with his daughter, when his daughter is born, Sarah. But and then the stories of how he overcame his own pain, his own health issues, to give a performance, and what it took to do that. And also some of the things early in his career that helped cause that, and James Whale, you son of a bitch, you did it.
Yeah.
There's the stories about, Frankenstein and carrying the dummy over the hill over 100 times or whatever. But it's, so you really get, I think you really get a rich perspective on the man. So, which is exactly what it is, the man behind the monster, right? So, good job.
I mean, he clearly had a really sweet, soft heart. I mean, just how much he hated the idea of the monster throwing the little girl in the water, and and how he didn't want people to know that he had donated all that money to save that theater, and like he was really, you could tell he was upset that the guy called, but I mean, it's nice. So, I know he may not want to be thanked, and I think he's just the type of person who would do it just to do it, not to get any sort of, oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and he was, he seemed to be genuinely embarrassed when they brought up his philanthropy on that This Is Your Life show.
Yeah, that's what she's mentioning.
That's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the look on his face when they called his name. I've seen that clip before, but that look, it's just for an instant. Just for an instant, he's like,
like
that look. It's like, I was like, oh man, that's piercing eyes there. But he was quite the professional when he got there. I liked the description of the meeting with Val Lewton, because they wanted to bring Karloff in, and Val Lewton didn't want to, but he met with them, and when he met with them, Karloff, of course, won him over with his personality and made 3 wonderful, wonderful films.
Yeah,
that get
and they
overlooked a lot, but
yeah, and I read that he really enjoyed those films because it was a sort of a departure for him. He'd just come off these 4 movies with Columbia, where he was basically a mad doctor in every one of them.
He did a lot of Mad Doctor stuff.
So these 3 with Lewton were a chance to that really different characters. The Bedlam, he's a evil guy.
Bedlam, yeah. Bedlam makes me scared of psychiatry. Okay, so that Bedlam, actually Bedlam that it's based off of, that's scary. That's legitimately scary to me. That's more scary than any of the monsters.
Yeah, so I thought it was an excellent biography. The only thing was that I wanted more. But I guess I need to read the books. I've seen tons of movies, and I need to go through. I've got a bunch of them, old ones that I haven't watched yet. I liked how they talked about, and now I forget the name of the movie already. I think it was Citizen something in 1931 that he was recognized for, and that the one, I think it was who was the director that said that you need 2 things, and one was you have to have this presence that people remember. It makes an impact.
Yeah, something about character.
Yeah, and that he character. Had that.
Yeah. Yeah, and he certainly did. It's proven over time. So amazing stuff, amazing film. I think you're going to find out that we're all going to recommend it here in a short second, because it's time to do that. Let's wrap this up. Let's give our final thoughts, our score 1 to 5, and our favorite scene. Crystal, you start off.
Okay, so obviously I think you should watch it. I don't know how to score this. This is a hard one. I mean,
kind of defies it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I'd say, it's done well. I guess I'll just say a 4. I mean, obviously, I think you should watch it. I think, especially for people like me who didn't know very much about Boris and his personal life, I think you'll find it fascinating. It's put together incredibly well. I like the flow of it a ton. I like that they mentioned a lot of the movies, and then you'll go, oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that one. And I think the interviewers are great. I mean, his daughter is hilarious. And she's so sweet, too. She's hilarious as she's talking about how, I've never seen so many tattooed body parts of blah, blah, blah. But all these people are so wonderful, So
many tattoos and pierced body parts.
Yeah, because we're freaks to her, But she's like, they're so fabulous, aren't they? I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I guess my favorite scene was, or my favorite part, was the story about Lon Chaney Sr. giving him the ride home.
Oh, isn't that great? Yes. That was a new one for me. I didn't know that. I should have, but I didn't know that one.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's such a, he didn't have to give him a ride home, he did, and then he actually helped propel his career, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, the best 20 minutes of his life. I'm probably right there, right? Of Boris's early on, anyway. All right, Jeff Mohr, you're up next. What was your final thoughts, your score, and favorite scene?
I'm going the same. It is hard to score, but I think I had a ball watching it. I'd say 4. there's a lot of things. A lot of it I knew, but there's a nuance that comes from hearing somebody tell a personal story that isn't come from, like, I knew he had trouble with his legs late in life, but to hear specific stories about what happened and what he did are insightful and make it real, I guess. So for favorite scene, I'm going to say the story about him being on the Red Skelton show.
Ah, you took my scene.
Oh.
Did I?
Yeah, you did. I had never heard that one before, but it was great.
I thought that was pretty good. He was not in good shape, but you sure couldn't tell. And he was on there with Vincent Price. So.
And they sang, and they
and he looked. You couldn't tell there was anything wrong with him from watching that.
It was awesome. Yeah, I like that. All right, for me, I think this is a great documentary about the man. I think any horror fan should watch it and will enjoy it quite a bit. As documentaries go, it doesn't necessarily push all the buttons because it doesn't really invest you in a particular story. I mean, it's more informative, right? It feels a little dry in that area, but it's fascinating. But it doesn't really make any emotion swell. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't do a lot of things that documentaries, really great documentaries, do. So I think the 4 score is absolutely correct on this because it does what it sets out to do perfectly. It just doesn't take that extra step. And and for me at this point, with my background with years of studying and reading and watching, I that's what I need out of it. And we've gotten documentaries about actors and stuff that really get into that. Like the
Savini one,
the Mark Patton one. So there's some really ones that really get in there and they have opportunity to do that with Boris Karloff, but that's not what it was setting out to do. It was setting out to tell his life story, and it does that.
The other two you mentioned, the people were still alive and could tell the story themselves, as opposed to.
Well, that does help. But at the same time, I'm just thinking from not from the content, but from the format, right? It's perspective. That's all I'm saying. So, but I think 4 is perfectly correct on this. I think it's a solid, excellent, must-watch documentary. I hope it gets out there and people say it. Mm-hmm.
It's informative.
Yep.
Because for someone who doesn't know anything, you get all these movies. I wrote down some that I hadn't seen, and for me, it was
Yeah, there were.
So the less you know, the more you'll probably like it.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's made. Yeah, I think that's the audience actually. So not wrong.
Well, and I just found out recently that in the Thriller was not something I watched when it was on, and I got an opportunity to watch the whole. I think it was the second season on. I think it's Classics Horror Movie Channel, but he's in some episodes. He plays the key role, the lead role in some episodes. And so that's kind of neat too. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the one they showed in there. A lot of where he was, the zombies, if you will, running around with him. Not Romero zombies.
Right.
Predate.
That's an underrated show. There's some stuff written by Robert Bloch in there. There's a Robert E. Howard story, Pigeons from Hell, which is pretty good.
Pigeons from Hell. Oh my God.
Oh, it's a famous. That's good. I have a graphic novel of that actually.
Nice. Favorite scene?
Sorry.
I had in there to be the. The scene with Red Skelton, because I didn't even know he was on Red Skelton. I didn't know that, and I want to find that. But if not that, I'm going to say The Raven happens to be one of my favorite films, and I love the story. I know about the terror part of it, and that's fascinating. That he's such a great guy. He says, "Okay, well, you hired me for extra days. Let's go do this other thing." And some actors would go, "No, you're going to pay me extra," and he's fine. Which is great. He's a thespian, right? So but the stairways, right? And he said, I'm not going to be able to go down those stairs. And Roger Corman shares, what they did to make it work, and that he was, such a trooper to do that, because even that, going down a couple steps and then stopping, and then they brought him down, and he goes down the a couple steps at the bottom, and then they cut a scene in between, and you get the impression he walks down the entire steps. Still took a lot out of him, but he did it right. And of course, your scene, Jeff, shows that as well. Yeah. And it just really shows you the resolve of this guy, and the passion he has for acting.
If we did it again, I would talk about it. If we recorded the Classic Era episode on Black Sabbath again, because there's a scene where he's stealing the kid out of the house or the cottage or whatever that is, and he's walking down some stairs, and he almost kind of stumbles, catches himself into the railing, and then laughs and said something to the kid, like it's cool what he does to cover it up, that anyway.
Yeah, and that one thing about where they were like, I don't know what's going on, but we get the squeaking on the sound.
Yes.
All right, well, we can keep going on probably for the entire hour and a half of the film, going over these elements. This gives you an idea of how good this is. So check it out, and we hope you enjoyed this review. Yeah. Crystal, Jeff, thank you for joining me. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Hey.
All right, let's look at it.
Adios.